I joined the Dartmoor SAR call-out because they were short and I'd already promised my wife I'd stop skipping trainings. I packed a rope, a head torch, and a thermal blanket, and my plan was to sweep a grid near a known bog edge where a lone walker's phone last pinged, then hand them off to the medic team. I've been half-arse about it lately. Always an excuse, always a late shift, and the look my wife gave me last time I bailed made my stomach twist. So I went. I told myself it would be wet, miserable, routine, and then I'd be home before my kid woke up and asked why dad smells like mud again. I went with 2 others, but we split once we hit the open ground because fog eats groups. That wasn't bravado. That's just how it is out there. You keep a line too tight, and one person steps wrong, and you've got 3 casualties instead of 1. Still, the moment their head torches slid off into the white and their radio chatter thinned out, I felt that stupid animal part of my brain start counting ways to die. I kept checking my compass because the more makes everything look like it repeats. Every clump of heather looked like the last clump. Every dip in the ground looked like a safe step until it wasn't. I poked ahead with my pole, tested the grass, and once the turf gave under my boot in this soft, quiet way that made my chest seize, I yanked back hard, and my heel came up with a smear of black muck like I'd stepped on an open wound. I muttered a swear, checked my bearing again, and forced myself to move like a machine. We found the first sign fast, a boot print that ended in a drag mark like someone had sat down hard and tried to crawl. The print edges were sharp, recent, and beside it the heather was flattened in a short, desperate path. I knelt and touched the muck without thinking, then wiped my glove on my trousers and hated myself for it. Because peat doesn't feel like dirt, it feels like grease. I called in on the radio, gave a rough bearing, and started following the drag mark, because that's what you do, even when your gut says the ground is lying to you. Then nothing, just heather and wet grass that looked solid until you stepped and felt it wobble under you. That wobble is the worst part. It doesn't splash like a puddle. It flexes like it wants to pretend it's safe until your weight commits. I heard him before I saw him. Not shouting. A thin, exhausted sound, like he didn't have breath left for panic. It kept starting and stopping, like he was trying not to make noise, like noise would make it worse. When my torch finally caught him, he was sunk to mid-thigh in black peat, arms raw from clawing at grass. His phone hung from his wrist on some lanyard, and the screen was dead, just a black mirror. His face was pale and shiny with sweat, even in the cold, and he kept blinking hard like he couldn't believe what he was stuck in. He tried to shift when he saw me, and the bog answered with this slow sucking noise that made my skin crawl like it was kissing him back. I got low, stayed on the firmer tuft, and told him to stop fighting it. I didn't waste time with comfort, because comfort doesn't pull you out. I grabbed the rope and looked for an anchor and found a rock that barely deserved the name, a granite lump half buried in heather. I looped the rope around it twice, cinched it down, and shoved my boot against the stone because I didn't trust the ground for anything. I slid the rope around his chest, under his arms, tight enough to hold but not crush, and I told myself, steady pull, no hero yanks. The first pull lifted him a few inches, and then he stopped dead, held like the peat had fingers around his legs. The rock shifted a touch, and my stomach dropped. I dug my heel in harder and pretended I didn't feel it. He started crying, not loud, just leaking sound. I don't blame him. The more doesn't kill fast. It humiliates you first. It makes you work for your own panic. I kept my voice level and my hands busy because if I stopped, I'd start imagining the headlines and the phone call to my wife. I called for the others again, sharper this time, and the radio crackled back with half words and a promise they were moving, plus the medic team was being directed in. Fog messes with distance. 10 minutes can feel like an hour when someone is sinking in front of you, and you can hear the wet suction every time they breathe. We hauled, reset, hauled again. I pulled until my shoulders shook, then eased off, then pulled again, trying to coax him up like a stuck tire. Each time the bog made that slow, wet slurp, and each time his body rose and then locked again. His trouser legs tore at the knee, and the Pete swallowed the fabric like it was hungry, taking the loose cloth down as if it could chew. He tried to push up with his arms, and I snapped at him to stay still, because every wriggle made the suction worse, and I could see his hands trembling from cold and pain. Finally, his left leg came free with a wet pop, and the smell hit old rot and cold iron. It punched right through the cold air and into the back of my throat. He screamed then, because the skin on his calf had peeled in a strip, and the bog had taken it clean like a slow blade. Not a scrape, not a tear, a strip, neat enough to make me nauseous. He kicked on instinct, and I had to lean back and hold him steady, so he didn't slide straight back in. I threw the thermal blanket over his shoulders just to stop him dumping heat, and his hands clutched it like it was the only thing keeping him in the world. The others arrived as shadows first, then as hands on the line, and the moment I felt another person take weight off me, I nearly collapsed. The medic swore under his breath when he saw the calf and got to work with gloves and dressings while we kept tension on the rope. We shifted the angle and pulled again, careful, patient, like we were disarming something. His right leg fought longer, and when it finally came, it dragged up more black peat and more torn fabric, and his cry turned into this hoarse animal sound that I'll probably hear in my sleep forever. We dragged him onto firmer ground the moment he was free, hold him back until the grass stopped wobbling. We got him wrapped tight. He kept trying to stand like pride would fix his leg. Shock does weird things. It makes you believe you can outwill your body. I forced him down, held his shoulders, told him to breathe, told him to keep his head up. He kept looking past me, at the bog, like he'd left something in there. Not his boot, not his phone. Something else. Like the peat had said a word to him when it had him, and he couldn't stop listening for it. When the helicopter finally arrived, it didn't look heroic. We heard it before we saw it, a deep thump somewhere above the fog, and then the downwash flattened the heather and stung my eyes with grit. We popped strobes and waved like idiots into a blank sky until the winchman dropped through the white, clipped the walker into a harness, and in seconds the guy who'd been sinking was rising up into the gray, wrapped in foil and bloodstained gauze. The sound faded, the fog closed back in, and it was just us and the hole in the ground like nothing had happened. After the helicopter took him, I went back to retrieve the rope and my anchor because leaving Kid out there feels like leaving a piece of yourself. I told the others I'd be quick. One of them told me not to be a fucking idiot. I told them I wasn't. Both lies. I followed my own prints, the only reliable line in that white. And when my torch hit the churned peat again, my stomach tightened like it remembered before my brain did. I knelt by the rock, started coiling the rope, and the beam caught something pale right where his leg had been. At first I thought it was a root. Then I saw the curve of teeth. A human jawbone sat half exposed in the peat, cleanly stripped, with bits of hair still tangled in it. The teeth looked too perfect, too present, like it had been waiting. I didn't touch it. I just stared, and the smell of rot and iron came back, and I realized that smell hadn't been just his injury. The bog hadn't just held him. It had been holding someone else for years, waiting for a new body to shake the old one loose. I reported it. The police came, did their measured, careful work, and told us not to talk. They spoke like they were calming a dog. Firm, flat, no drama. They bagged the bone, took photos of the ground like the ground was a suspect, and then they reminded us about statements and media and sensitivity. At debrief later, they told us to keep it off socials, keep it out of group chats, let the family liaison handle anything if it turned into an ID. I nodded and kept my mouth shut because what do you even say other than that the more eats people and keeps the bones like coins? I drove home with peat under my nails and couldn't look at my kid without thinking about teeth in the mud. My wife asked how it went, and I started to answer, then saw her face and just said, "Fine," because I didn't want her to picture me out there alone, anchored to a rock, pulling on a rope while the ground tried to keep what it had. I still think about how the Moor kept that jaw quiet until the exact moment we needed to be reminded what sinking really means. I went to Dartmoor for a stupid geocache streak because it was my day off and I needed a reason to leave the house. I packed a handheld GPS, a power bank, and a flask of tea, and my plan was to knock out 3 caches near a tour, grab a pub lunch, and be home before dark. I went alone because none of my mates care about finding plastic boxes in the mud. I kept my phone on low brightness because the battery drains fast in wind. The drive out felt normal, which is what pisses me off the most about it now. Radio low, heater doing nothing. That wide, empty land rolling past the windows like it's been bored for 1,000 years. I parked in a little lay-by by a cattle grid, checked my pockets, checked the map, and told myself to stop being dramatic. It was just a walk with an app. I'd done worse for less. The first cache was fine. I hopped the gate, followed the track, climbed up to a little pile of stone, and pulled the container from where it was meant to be. Logbook damp, pencil stub, names I didn't know. I signed, shoved it back, and felt that dumb little hit of satisfaction. Streak brain. Numbers on a screen, making me feel like I'd won something. The second was a mess of wet logs and sheep shit, but I found it. I knelt there with my sleeves up, dug through rot, and finally got my fingers around a black tube wrapped in tape. The smell stuck to my hands even after I wiped them on my jeans. I remember thinking I should have brought gloves, then laughing at myself because who plans PPE for a hobby? On the walk to the third, I noticed a bloke behind me at a distance that kept staying the same. Close enough to be there, far enough to pretend it was coincidence. No dog, no buck, just a dark jacket and a steady pace. At first I tried to write it off. Lots of people walk out there, but he didn't look around. He didn't stop. He didn't do that casual thing where you pretend you're not watching someone. He just held the same gap, like a metronome. I sped up. He sped up. I slowed down and pretended to check my GPS. He slowed down too. I cut off the path across open ground toward the tour because I didn't like being funneled along the track. He cut too, matching my angle like he'd read my mind. That's when my phone's signal dropped to nothing, then came back, then dropped again. It wasn't one clean dead zone. It flickered like a warning light. I told myself it was paranoia. Then he started whistling, one short pattern, over and over. It wasn't a tune. It was too clipped, too regular, like tapping a code on a pipe. The sound carried in the wind in this ugly way, like it wasn't meant for me, but I was close enough to hear it anyway. I looked past him, squinting, and saw movement far out. Another person, low in the heather, crouched like they were waiting. Not standing, not walking, just there. My mouth went dry. 2 is not coincidence. My brain tried to bargain. Maybe it's a couple out for a laugh. Maybe it's nothing, but my body didn't buy it. My shoulders tightened and my legs went hot, ready to bolt. I turned back toward the nearest road because the road meant cars and people and noise. My handheld GPS chose that exact moment to freeze. The arrow spun in circles like I was rotating in place. The distance readout jumped, then locked, then jumped again. I smacked the side of it like it was an old remote. Nothing. I pocketed it and ran. I didn't plan it. I just ran. Boots hit rock, slipped, hit again. My lungs started burning fast because the cold air goes in sharp. Behind me, the whistling stopped. That scared me more than the sound because it meant the message got through. Silence out, there isn't peaceful. It's a tension. I didn't look back right away because I knew if I saw him closer, I'd panic harder. I kept my head down and picked lines between boulders and scrub, trying to stay unpredictable. I fumbled my phone out and tried to call, and it wouldn't even start the call screen before the signal died again. I swear I could feel the bars vanish like someone flicked a switch. I hit a patch of body ground and almost went down. I threw my body sideways and felt the ground wobble under my foot like a mattress. My boots sank to the ankle and the mud grabbed it like a hand. For a second I thought, this is it. This is how people get found later with their stuff scattered around. And some article says they strayed from the path. I yanked my leg free, so hard my knee popped, and I kept running anyway, because falling would have made me a sitting target. I finally glanced back. The bloke was closer now, still not sprinting, just moving like he had all day. The other one was gone from where I'd seen them, which made my stomach drop again. I couldn't see them because they were behind the scrub or because they'd moved ahead of me. Either way, I felt boxed in. I started swearing out loud without meaning to, like the words could fill the space and keep me from freezing up. When I reached the car park, my hand shook so hard I fumbled my keys twice. I got inside, locked the doors, and sat there listening. No footsteps, no voices, just wind and distant sheep. My heart hammered so hard it made my vision pulse. I kept staring at the mirrors, waiting for someone to step into view, waiting for a hand to slap the glass. Nothing happened. That was the next mindfuck. No big confrontation. No gotcha. Just me in a locked car, feeling like prey that made it to the burrow by accident. I try to breathe slow. I try to make myself look normal in case anyone saw. I wiped my hands on my thighs and realized they were filthy, and I laughed one sharp because of course I'd come out here to touch a plastic box and end up shaking in a car. Then I looked at my windscreen. Someone had drawn a line in the condensation with a fingertip. 3 little arrows and a set of letters. The exact cache code I'd been heading toward. They couldn't have known that unless they'd watched my screen at some point. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. The letters weren't sloppy. The arrows were clean, like someone took their time and didn't care if I saw. I had this flash of me at the second cache, crouched and distracted, phone angled just right. I remembered the steady footfalls behind me. I remember telling myself I was being paranoid. It hit me how easy it would be to learn someone's route if you know what they're chasing. I wasn't hiking. I was following coordinates like an obedient little arrow. I started the car hard enough to make it jerk. I didn't get out. I didn't check the area. I just drove. I drove until I hit the nearest village, parked right by a row of shops, and went into a cafe because I wanted people around me, noise, faces, anything that wasn't open land and wind. I sat there with shaking hands and checked the geocaching app. The third cache had been logged, found 10 minutes earlier by an account with no history, no profile photo, and a name made of random letters. It wasn't even a proper username, just keyboard garbage. One log, that cache, that time, like it had been created for that moment, and then it would vanish. I thought about calling the police, and then I pictured how it would sound out loud. A man whistled. My GPS freaked out. Someone wrote on my windscreen. I could already hear the polite voice, the little pause, the suggestion that maybe I'd panicked. So I didn't. I just sat there, jaw clenched, scanning every face that came through the door like I was trying to catch a reflection of that dark jacket. I felt sick in a quiet way. Not dramatic panic anymore. Just this heavy certainty that what happened wasn't random. The whistling wasn't a nervous habit. It was communication. The crouched figure wasn't some walker tying a boot. They were waiting for the signal. And someone at some point had been close enough to see my cache code and then close enough again to leave it on my windscreen like a receipt. I stayed in that cafe longer than I needed to, pretending to drink my tea, pretending to read the menu, watching the door every time it opened. I kept thinking about how I'd chosen that route, how the app shows parking spots, trails, little favorites, how you can watch someone log caches over weeks and know what kind of places they like. Quiet places, empty places, places where you can walk behind them for half an hour and no one will interrupt. When I finally drove home, I took the long way on main roads. I kept checking the mirrors like a tick, half expecting headlights to sit on my bumper. Nothing followed, at least nothing I could swear to, and somehow that didn't help. It just meant they didn't need to. I got home, locked the door, and sat on my sofa with my shoes still on because I couldn't calm down enough to move like a normal person. I opened the app again and again like I could force it to explain. It didn't. It just showed the same boring map like nothing happened. I stopped geocaching after that. Not because I'm traumatized by the moor, because I can't stand the idea that someone out there learned my habits, learned my routes, and can predict where I'll be by what I chase for fun. I took the Dartmoor drone gig because a wedding venue wanted dramatic more shots for their promo and I needed the money. I packed my drone, spare props, and a laminated map of permitted areas, and my plan was to launch near a public footpath, grab 10 minutes of sweeping tours in cloud, then pack up before the wind got too violent. I went alone because it's easier to fly without someone talking in your ear. I kept checking the wind readings because gusts here can slap your machine out of the sky. I pulled into a little gravel car park with a faded board full of warnings. Dogs on leads. Don't light fires. Keep to the path. Nothing that screamed live range or mod. No soldiers, no cones, no barrier across the road. I checked my map again, checked my phone signal, checked the anemometer. I even scanned for other pilots, because sometimes you'll see a guy with a case and you'll at least know what kind of radio noise to expect. There was nobody, just wind and that empty, more quiet that makes you talk to yourself without noticing. The weather turned on me in minutes. Fog rolled in low and fast, wiping the horizon like someone erased it. Wind picked up and shoved at my shoulders, tugged my hood, slapped the car door when I leaned in for the case. I stood there arguing with myself like an addict. I told myself I'd do one quick flight and call it because I didn't want to drive home empty-handed and eat the invoice, and because I've done one quick flight 100 times and gotten away with it. I got the case open, clipped on props, checked batteries, and did the rituals you do to keep panic out of your hands. GPS lock, compass, home point set, RTH height high, because tours can appear out of nowhere in mist. I could still make out the car park sign behind me as a pale shape, so I told myself I was anchored to something real. Then the fog thickened and the sign became a blur, and my world shrank to wet grass and my own breathing. I launched, got the drone up above the fog layer, and for a few seconds it was perfect. Tours like islands, sunlight on cloud, everything quiet in that unreal way where you forget your feet are freezing. I started a slow cinematic yaw and felt that little hit of relief, like, okay, I can hand them something. Then my controller buzzed a warning I hadn't seen before. Interference. My live feed stuttered. The drone drifted sideways, even though my sticks were centered. At first I blamed the wind. Then I looked at telemetry and it didn't match. The drift was too smooth, like a hand on the side of it. I nudged left and it kept sliding right for a beat, like it was thinking about me. The controls lagged like the signal was swimming through sludge. Bars dipped, came back, dipped again. The image tore, froze, jumped. I lifted the controller higher like that helps and walked a few steps to improve line of sight, even though there was nothing to see but gray soup. Then a dull boom rolled through the fog, far but heavy. Another followed, closer, not thunder, too sharp. My stomach tightened because I knew Dartmoor has active ranges and I knew fog makes people stupid. I'd read the warnings. I'd laughed at stories about tourists crossing the wrong fence. And yet there I was, walking while staring at a screen like an absolute dickhead, while explosions measured distance in my chest. I started moving faster, eyes locked on the feed, trying to steer the drone back to the home point. My boots sank into soft ground. The wind shoved at my back like it wanted me deeper. I checked my laminated map with numb fingers, but the landmarks were gone. Everything looked like the same blank smear. A fence appeared out of nowhere, wire half buried, posts leaning, and a sign I couldn't read until my torch hit it. Red letters, live firing. My heart dropped through my ribs. I was already inside. I spun around to run back, and the fog shifted just enough to show shapes ahead. Tanks or armored vehicles, low and dark, moving slow like ghosts. No lights, just bulks sliding through white, and a metallic clank you feel more than hear. Another boom cracked, and the ground gave a soft thump under my boots, and I had this clear, sick thought that if something landed near me, nobody would even find me. The more would just swallow it. The drone feed suddenly cleared like someone flicked a switch and showed a clean aerial view of the range. Mud tracks, fences, dark vehicles, and then a small figure on the ground in a bright jacket, running with a controller in his hands. Me. For a second, I tried to tell myself it was someone else, because it's hard to accept your own body as a dot in a military range. Then the figure looked up, me looking up, and my stomach went weightless. The drone wasn't filming where I was pointing it. It was filming me like I was the subject. Centered, steady, tracking my movement while I stumbled and scanned the fog like prey. I tried to force return to home. I held the button down until my thumb went numb. Nothing. No countdown. No initiating. The drone just hovered and kept watching, smooth as hell like it had a job. My controller screen flickered and showed a new icon. Another pilot connected. Not weak signal. Not generic interference. Another pilot. My throat went cold. I wasn't alone on the link. I watched the little text under it change like a status update, as if the drone was introducing me to someone. The frequency readout jumped, then settled, and my sticks felt like they were connected to nothing. I swore out loud and tried every desperate fix, toggle modes, reset, kill the video, anything to claw back manual control. The drone stayed calm and kept framing me. Not random, not messy, like it wanted my face, my hands, my panic, like it was making content out of me. I could see my headlamp beam swinging in a shot, could see how small I was in all that nothing, and it made me feel exposed in a way I can't explain without sounding insane. A boom cracked again, and I felt it in my teeth. Dirt jumped in the fog off to my left. Close enough, I saw grit spray and heard little clicks on stone. That snapped something open in me. I stopped caring about the drone, the footage, the money. I dropped the controller and ran, because a drone isn't worth a body bag. Behind me, the controller kept beeping in the grass like a dying animal, fast and frantic, the kind of beeping you get when the signal is gone, only it sounded personal, like it was begging me to come back and pick it up. I ran blind. My boots slipped, and I caught myself on the fence, tore my glove, felt the wire bite my palm. I yanked free and kept going. I expected shouting. I expected sirens. I expected a truck to roll up and a soldier to pin me and ask what the fuck I thought I was doing. Nothing came, just fog and the distant rhythm of firing, like someone knocking on a door I couldn't find. I kept glancing over my shoulder, even though I couldn't see more than 10 feet, because my brain needed to check anyway. When the car park finally showed through, it looked fake. My car sat there clean and normal while I was shaking and soaked. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there gasping until my vision steadied. Then I drove out with my hands clamped so hard on the wheel my knuckles ached, convinced that any second I'd see blue lights or a barrier. Nobody stopped me. No one chased. That's what fucked me up most. How easy it was to slip into a live range and back out, invisible. Hours later, my drone auto-landed somewhere after the battery gave up, and somebody found it and called it in. A ranger rang me and told me to collect it. When I did, he had this blank face like he'd already decided I was going to die young, and he didn't want to know my name. He didn't lecture me. He just handed the case over and said, "Quiet, be more careful where you walk." Like it wasn't just walking that was the problem. At home, I pulled the SD card out and watched the footage, expecting tours and cloud. It wasn't that. It was 10 minutes of me running through fog, looking over my shoulder, clutching the controller, and then, right before the signal cut, me stopping, turning toward the camera like I'd heard someone call my name. When I pulled up the flight log, the timestamp shows a dead flat pause right there, like my whole body buffered. My heart didn't care what my memory said. The data said I stopped. You can see my mouth move like I'm answering. My shoulders drop. I look calm the way I hate. Then I take 3 steps forward in a thicker fog, steady and deliberate, like I'm going to meet someone. Then I jerk like I wake up, and I start running again. I don't remember stopping. I remember running. The drone recorded a version where I paused, listened, and walked deeper into the fog for 3 full steps before I snapped back and sprinted away. That's the bit I can't get rid of. Not the military range. Not the explosions. The 3 steps my body took toward whatever was calling, even when my brain insists it didn't.